Hello class, this is your teacher Mr. McDougall with your next Premiere Pro tutorial. In this next lesson we are going to talk about keyframes and how to manipulate them to create movement in a video, which we also call the Ken Burns effect because without getting into too much history, he was one of the pioneers as a documentary filmmaker to create this effect, which just simply adds movement to images to make them more interesting. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. In the meantime, remember to download the exercise files that I provided to you. It'll be down here at the bottom, or it'll be up here in the top right, which looks like it'll say your name and then show the whole thing. So click on the files, and then this one will actually show you because these are pictures and not images. We're going to turn them in, or they're pictures and not videos. We're going to turn them into videos. So click on these three dots, click on Open a New Window. And then you'll see the similar window, but you see this download button right here. This one should not say download anyway because they're not super large files, but it should download very quickly. Now we can close this and go back to the assignment, and let's create a project folder and move those downloaded files into a new project folder. So click on the Finder. That will open up our recents, but let's go to Downloads. Here's the one we just downloaded right here. The 602 exercise files. Remember, yours will say your full name and then this part. If you can't see it, if yours looks like this and you can't read the whole thing, just come up here right next to where it says kind. You can turn your mouse into a little double arrow. If you click and drag, you can drag this whole category off to the right and it will give you more space to read the whole thing. But yours will say your full name and then this exercise file is for keyframes. So remember to extract it. You're going to double click on it. That creates two. So you'll see you have the zip folder and now the blue folder, the one that just says folder, that's the one that we want. So now we need to open a second window. Go down to the Finder face, right click on his face, new Finder window. Move this second window out of the way. We can click and drag to move it out of the way like this. And we need to open our Google Drive, My Drive, Intro to Graphics folder. Same thing, here's our Premiere Pro workspace from the previous lesson. Let's make another new folder. So right click, new folder. And this one is called Keyframes. Perfect, always just giving the folder, our project, everything the same name as the assignment for the day, just to keep it simple. Okay, so let's open these back up. So now we just need to move this blue folder with the exercise files into this folder right here. So just click and drag this whole folder, bring it in right there. Again, please do it the way I'm showing you. The whole point of doing it this way is to keep your files organized, not give you any errors, and just make it overall easier for you to keep track of everything. If you don't do it the way I'm showing you, most likely you will start to get cluttered, your files will end up in the wrong place, and you'll get confused and you won't be able to turn in your project. And I don't want that to happen. I want to make it as easy as possible. And I won't walk you through the downloading process in every single tutorial. I'm just going to do it for these first few lessons until you get used to it, and then I'll stop once we get to our first project. Okay, so just for the next few tutorials, I'll walk you through this whole thing. Eventually I will skip it and we'll just jump right into Premiere because I'll have assumed you have figured it out by then. Now that we have our files saved in Google Drive, let's open Premiere Pro. So click Premiere Pro. And just as I mentioned before, every single time we create something new for the lesson is going to be a new project. So we're going to click this big blue button right here. Most important things, name and location. So this one is called Keyframes. And we need to tell it where to save, where it's going to save that purple file and where it's going to save everything else. So click this for the drop down. By default, it's going into my previous folder, which is the workspace one. I don't want to save it in there. I want to save it in my new folder. So choose location. It'll bring this up. So let's look on Premiere Pro. I want to save it in this one. If this window doesn't pop up, then you can find it just like we did before by going to Google Drive, My Drive, finding your Intro to Graphics folder, and finding your keyframes folder that we just made. Don't save it in here, not in the exercise file one, just in the keyframes one. Click select. So it's called keyframes. We're saving it in the keyframes folder. As a reminder, make sure this is checked. So we're not going to go into the import mode. We want to skip import mode and then hit create. So now we have our blank panel. You should be on the editing window. So make sure you're on window, workspaces, and that you're on this editing tab. If yours looks all weird or different from mine, go to Window, Workspaces, and then Reset to put everything back to normal. This one on this top right, we don't need this one for right now, so I'm going to click these little lines and do Close Panel. We just want the main four: the source or the preview monitor, the media bin with the media files, our timeline, and our final program monitor, which shows us our final product. Now the best way to import the files, just like before, go to Finder. I don't need my downloads folder anymore. That one's useless, so I can close that. I want this one with my exercise files. So let's open the Keyframes one. And this whole folder with the exercise files, I'm going to bring it in. If you saved it correctly, like I just showed you, you should see this purple file inside the folder next to your exercise file folder. Take this folder with the exercise files, drag it, and drop it right in here. Now we have our folders in, so we could start editing. As a reminder, one thing I like to do is just continually save my progress just in case. So I'm going to hit Command S to save my work, and I'll hit that frequently as we go on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add video movement to all of these pictures. So if you scrub over these, you'll notice nothing happens because they're not videos, they're just images, but we're going to create videos out of them. We will see something like my example right here. So instead of a static shot of just pictures, if I play this, these pictures have movement. You see how it's zooming out, the next one will pan over. We're just going to create some movement kind of like this to create more engaging atmosphere in the video. Just like this, instead of just static still shots instead. So let's do that. Click this here. There we go. Let me show you how to add that right now. So we're going to start adding these clips in. Add all 6 of them in any order that you want. I'm just going to drag this one right there. Here's my first image. Here's my next one. Put them in any order that you would like. I'm just going to go in numbered order, but feel free to mix it up. Maybe you want the dog first and then the basketball, or then the flower, whatever you want. Just make sure you're using all 6 of them. Remember, this 7th one that pops up, this is not actually a video clip, this is the sequence. See how if I scrub over it shows the whole thing? It's actually showing my entire sequence right here. It gives it the same name as the first clip I put down. So since I put down keyframe 1, it titled the sequence keyframe 1. See that right there? So on this sequence 1, I'm going to click on it, wait a second, click on it again so I could rename it. I want it to be called sequence 1. So now that I've called it sequence 1, it renames it to right here. The sequence is the whole thing I'm editing on my timeline. Whenever you put a picture or an image on the timeline, by default, Premiere Pro puts it at about 4.5 seconds, kind of about right at 4.5 seconds. So your final video should be 29.24 seconds. That should be what it is. Don't change or trim the clips at all. They should all be the same. We're not going to do any trimming in this one. I just want to make sure that I'm going to show you how to do the effect, but don't cut them down. Leave it at 29.24 seconds. That should be the final length. So if I play the video as it is, if I just hit my space bar and play, you can see that it's just a static image. There's no movement at all. It just plays, it just goes to the next one, but that's pretty boring. So we're going to add a little bit of movement to each one. Let's start with our first clip right here. So you can always move the playhead up here. You could always click right above this yellow line and the playhead will jump right to that spot. So if I click over here right at the beginning, I'm going to edit my first clip right here. So the way we're going to do that is up here in the Effect Controls tab. This is a lot of fun. We do a lot of editing up here as well. Click on Effect Controls. If it's blank, it's because no clip is selected. So I don't have anything selected right here. I got to click on my first clip. Ta-da! And now this stuff pops up. Yours might pop up like this, or it might be closed like this. It just depends. The way you can open and close is with these arrows. Anytime you see little arrows like this, it just means this menu can be open or closed. So all these arrows can be expanded, drop down, just like that, just by clicking these little arrows. So what we're going to do is open the one for motion right here. We're going to open this motion category. So we see position, scale, and some of these other options right here that we'll get into a little bit later. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my blue playhead. You see how I moved the CTI up here? It also moves down here. It's because these two are connected right here. This is showing me a reflection of what's going on down here. So take your blue playhead, and we're going to move it towards the left. Not all the way to the left, but just a little bit to the left side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mess around with the scale. So anytime you see blue numbers like this, it means you can change those numbers and you can also drag and drop them, or not drag and drop them, but pull them to the left and the right. So if I hover my mouse over this blue number, you see how my mouse changes to a finger with arrows on it? What that means is I can click and hold my mouse and drag it to the left or the right to change the number, and it will change the scale. The scale is the size of the picture. So watch, if I click and drag this to the left, I'm changing the scale. I drug it down to about 57, so it's about 57% showing right now, which is why it's a lot smaller. I can also drag it all the way to the right, and I can go something like that. Now I'm more zoomed in. You can also type on these numbers right here. If you remember what it's at, it was at 100 originally, so I could just click once and I could type in the number 100 and it will go back to normal as well. So now we're going to use this scale number to create a zoom effect. So take your blue playhead, as I mentioned, make sure it's towards the left. Let's take this number and let's zoom it in. Let's start zoomed in and we'll do a zoom out effect. So I'm going to take this number and let's drag it in. Let's zoom in on this guy. Maybe right about there. That looks good. Maybe somewhere around 200. That looks pretty good. Somewhere like close to 200. Let's say that. So now that I'm at 200, the image is like this now. If I play the video, it's stuck in that spot because I haven't done any movement yet. So let's move our playhead to the left. And the way we're going to create movement is to create keyframes, which is the name of this whole lesson. And the way we create keyframes is with this stopwatch right here. So when you see the stopwatch, it says toggle animation. So where it says scale, click the stopwatch. So you'll click the stopwatch, you'll notice a couple of things. It's going to turn blue, means it's running. Got this blue dot right here, and now you have this white keyframe dot right in that spot we just started. So as long as this stopwatch is running and active, every time I move this and change the scale, it will create a new keyframe. So now that I've created the first keyframe, let's move the playhead towards the right. Not all the way, just most of the way towards the right. And now we're going to change the scale again. So let's change the scale to make it smaller, so let's zoom out. So zoom out a little bit, you can go back to 100. Don't go past 100 or else it's going to go to the black bars. We don't want to see the black bars. So let's go to about 100 or close to 100. Right about there. So now what I just did is I told Premiere Pro at this point in time, at this CTI, at this point in time, the scale needs to be 200. And by the time it gets to this point in time, the scale needs to be 105. And in between that time, as it changes, it will create the zoom effect. So if I start my video at the beginning and I hit play, it'll pass here. You'll see the zoom out happening until it gets to there, and then it stops, just like that. So now you've created a zoom out effect. Just like that. The speed of the effect is determined by how close these keyframes are to each other. If I take these keyframes, and they can be moved, I can drag it and move it over. If I move these over, if they're really close together, there's less time for the transition to happen, so it's going to happen really fast. Watch. See how much faster the zoom was because they're so close together. For all of these effects, we're going to take these two clips and take them all the way out to the left and the right. So take this dot, move it all the way out to the left. Take this one, move it all the way out to the right. So that way it's a nice slow zoom out across the entire video, or across the entire image. So as I hit play now, it does this nice cool slow zoom throughout the whole thing until it gets to the next image. And now this one's still static for right now. But that is the Ken Burns effect. And this is what you see when you're on, let's say, the Netflix homepage. You know, when you stop watching Netflix and it goes to sleep and then it goes to that loading screen and it's showing you the previews of shows and it's doing this kind of zoom or pan thing. There's a reason for that. Again, it's to keep you engaged. This clip now is 100 times more interesting just by the simple fact that we added movement to it. If I looked at this picture and I just watched at it for a second, it's not interesting because there's no movement to it. Just by doing this, I'm now more engaged in looking at this because of the movement. Movement adds lots of interest to everything that you can create. Let's do the same thing on the next one. So let's go to the next clip right here. Make sure you have the clip selected. If I have my playhead here, but this clip is selected and I start messing around with this, I'm still affecting keyframe 1. I don't want to do that one. I want to affect keyframe 2. Let's do the same thing on this one, but let's change the position for this one. So for this one, we're going to start the same. Move your playhead towards the left. For position, you'll see that there's two numbers. There's one on the left and one on the right. This one on the left controls the left and right movement. See how it's moving the image left and right as I drag the number around? This one controls it going up and down. So if I move this one, it goes up and down like that. So let's start off to the side. Maybe you picked a different picture. Whatever picture you picked, that's fine. Do the same thing with me. So let's take this position and let's click and drag it So we move the image over a little bit. So we move it over towards the left. Before we click the stopwatch, I still want to zoom in because I don't want to see this. You never want to see black bars anywhere in your image. It means there's no data. We want to zoom in to get rid of those edges. So let's change our scale to just zoom in a little bit. Here we go. There's no movement yet because we haven't clicked the stopwatches and there's no keyframes. If I just play the video, it's going to stay right there, right where I moved it to. So now let's click the stopwatch for position. Click the stopwatch for position, and now same thing. It's tracking with the stopwatch running. It's making keyframes, create a new keyframe, and tracking the movement. So now let's move this towards the right. And now let's just change the position so it pans over to the right. I'm just going to keep moving it to the left. You can always let go of your mouse and click again. You don't have to do it all in one go. You can just let go and try one more time. Right there. Make sure you don't go too far. I don't want to see those black edges. Go to where right before you see those. Perfect. So now, same thing as before. By this point in time, the position's right here, and by this point in time, the position is over there, and in between, it creates this pan transition movement. Perfect. One thing to be careful of is, as long as the stopwatch is running, it will create keyframes every time you move this and change these numbers. So just something to be careful of. If I do this, if I move this here, and on accident, I start doing this, and I move this back over there, it created another keyframe. And if I do it again and move this or something and move this here, I created another keyframe. So be careful because now it thinks it's supposed to go to all those keyframes, and then Premiere Pro might start doing this. See how it's kind of moving all over the place because it doesn't know what to do? That's because I accidentally created too many keyframes. So these ones in the middle, you can click on it and just hit the delete key on your keyboard to get rid of it. Or you can right click and just clear it like that to get rid of it. Now I have my two that I want for the simple pan. Okay, easy peasy. Same as before, move them all the way out to the sides, to the far left and the far right. Now so far I have this cool zoom out effect on this guy. This one has a pan from the left to the right, making the videos way more engaging than just still pictures. For this next one, let's do both position and scale keyframe. So same thing for this one. We're going to start here to the left. This one, let's do a little zoom in with the scale and position at the same time. So I'm not going to change anything just yet. I'm just going to start the stopwatches. Let's go. Click both stopwatches, scale and position. So I have two keyframes that are running now. It's going to track both of them. So let's move this over to the right. And now let's zoom in on the bird's face or whatever image you picked. If you pick a different image, zoom in on something specific. So we're going to adjust the scale and position to zoom in. So let's adjust the scale. And now I got to change the position so I can find his face. You can keep clicking and dragging. If I let go, I can drag it again. I can let go and drag some more until I get it just right. Click and zoom, click, drag. Just dragging all these blue numbers around. Right there. Let's go super zoom on his eyeball. How about that? There we go. That's looking a lot better. So now I created this very dramatic zoom on his face. If I go back to the beginning, it's got both sets of keyframes now, and it's going to track both. Dun dun, very dramatic. I like that. Then it stops right there. So now when you move them, you can move both keyframes at the same time. So I can click and drag my mouse like this to select both my keyframes, and I'll drag them all the way to the left, and I'll click and drag, select both of those, and drag them all the way to the right. So now with this one, I've created a scale and position effect. So it zooms in at this kind of angle right there, zooms in right on him, instead of zooming into the middle like we did with the first example. Perfect. So what I want you to do with your remaining 3 exercise files is do those same 3 animations again. For the next one, do just the scale. Just do a keyframe animation with the scale. For your 5th one, do just a keyframe animation for the position. And for your last one, do keyframe animation for both scale and position. So you can mix it up. If you want to mix them around again, you can. Don't forget, you can maybe switch these if you want this one to be last and this one to be first. It's okay, whichever one you want to use. We're just practicing on the effects. We're not changing the length. They're all still 29.5 seconds, which is perfect. But once you're done, once you've created all 6 effects, you will again go to export. Go to export. Make sure you give it a new name, and you save it in the right folder. See, it's asking me, it thinks I want to save it in the previous folder, which is the Premiere Pro workspace. That's not correct. I want to save it in my Keyframes folder. So click the blue line. I want to save it in this one, the Keyframes folder. So we're going to save it in there. Make sure it's got a name, Sequence 1. Perfect. So it's called Sequence 1. It's going to save in the Keyframes folder. I don't need to change anything else. And I'm just going to go to Export. It'll take just a second. This one's a little bit longer than the other one, so it might take a couple extra seconds to export, but that is totally fine. We're going to export this cool video of the Ken Burns keyframe effect. So just like that, it's done. It was successfully exported. So if I go back to my folder, here it is. Just like I showed you last time, the MP4 file, that's a video file. You'll see this video play button. That means you did it correctly, and this is what you're going to turn in. Do not turn in this. You want to turn in this video file to today's assignment. Okay? So have fun, and let me know if you have any questions.